Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Welcome into Friday, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. Hope you're doing all right. Ready to get into the weekend. We are busy today. We'll spend some time with Parker Gabriel. Lincoln Journal Stars hit some Husker football thoughts and recruiting. And in hour two, Bill Dolman, Pride of Fairbury, going to be with us. Jay Moore will check in. And then the time Barry Switzer went to the Kentucky Derby. Story time with Coach Switzer. That is coming up at 5:40. You're welcome to join us. Open phones here the next 20 minutes or so. 466-3776. 466-3776. 800-825-5865. Find us on Twitter. Give us a follow. Chris Schmidt at Schmidt_radio or Elijah Herbal at Herbal Essence. And give us an email, chris@hailvarsity.com. So as we kind of inch closer to that mandatory workout window for a lot of college football programs, more and more programs are dialing back the voluntary part because of positive COVID testing. This story out a little bit earlier before we get into Bill Bender's latest posting on the top 25 college football programs the last 10 years. We spoke with Bill yesterday. It was great to have him on. And Nebraska does not make the cut. We will dive into that a little bit deeper. But how does it grab you here that Nebraska is choosing not to say anything publicly about the COVID-19 testing results? You have Nebraska officials say only that they're required to report any positive COVID test to Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, which says it can't release any information about what the university has reported because of privacy requirements. So does that, listen, you see what's been brought out at Clemson, you see what's going on at LSU, Boise, Kansas State. There's going to be positive infections. Would you like to know, as a Nebraska fan, not necessarily the who, but just the number? And if Nebraska is going to handle it that way, that's kind of their prerogative, their business. I really honestly applaud what I'm seeing out and about locally. And the thought that is, if you want college football season, you'll wear a mask. If you're not a mask wearer, I'm not going to degrade you. It's okay. But I don't know. I guess I don't fear a rampant spike at Nebraska per se, because we're not going to know, I guess, right? I mean, Nebraska could be very similar to Kansas State. Nebraska could be similar to what Boise is going through. Nebraska could also be similar to some of the programs like Iowa State, where there's a handful of kids that have tested positive, but overall, when they look at the athletic department, most people are fine right now.
I mean, Lincoln itself hasn't been a hotbed for COVID by any means. No. And
why is that? People are masking up. People are socially distancing. I think people are being respectful.
I mean, and when we get back into Nebraska releasing the numbers, as a fan, do I want to know? Yeah, but I don't think I have the right to know. I don't think it's as I'm a fan. I'm no more than that. It's it is invading upon people's privacy whenever you're getting I mean, look what's going to happen on social media. People are going to say, oh, why are these kids out partying and doing irresponsible things and catching COVID, where it might not even be their fault if they catch COVID. So I don't think that we should have the right to even know. But I do think we should know if it becomes a problem.
Yeah, if there's a major spike and a conglomeration of positive cases down on campus, I need to know, man.
Yeah.
Not that I'm down there a lot, but hopefully in the near future we're able to cover things. You have Nebraska's policy here. Upon arrival, yet all athletes were tested and put in a minimum 48-hour quarantine, and they're making student athletes comfortable. I'm for that. If these kids are coming back to do the voluntary side of things, and they're here to work out and kind of try and prepare for a season, right, that we hope happens. I'm okay with them and their privacy. I'm not really hung up on it. I guess I don't think and look at Nebraska as hiding anything. That's not how I'm looking at it. I think that they're in great communication with UNMC, and if this is how they want to go about it, this is how they're going to go about it.
Just like you said, I don't think it's hiding. It's more protecting. And if it becomes a problem, then I fully expect to know, as I said just now. But, I mean, you don't want to be that negative news story. Clemson became that negative news story pretty quickly when you hear, oh, man, these 20-plus guys have tested positive for COVID.
Well, it's 28 members of the athletic department as a whole.
The initial report, which was unconfirmed, I think, was that 23 football players had it, which I think is still unconfirmed at this point. Clemson never announced. But still, that quickly became a negative news story.
Well, at LSU, 30 guys on the team, that's reported because dudes went out to the bars. Now, it could be one guy, it could be 5 players, it could be staff members, who knows?
Yeah, and that's my problem with, I don't think you want to announce everybody, because it could be, maybe you do have one bad apple who has gone and spread it to 25 people, 30 people.
Well, it's not like it's an intentional spread.
Yeah, it's not indicative of the program, and I don't think it's indicative of what the athletic staff is doing down there, so why do you want to, what's the point, I guess, of releasing those 5 people, 10 people who caught it whenever it's only going to reflect poorly upon the university, and it's, I shouldn't say unpreventable, but it's something that just is happening. This is the country we're living in right now.
It could happen. A spike could happen in Lincoln, but I'm kind of monitoring what are the numbers looking like in Lincoln and Lancaster County. Are guys out and about? Are they being safe if they're out and about? We'll talk to Parker about this because he quote tweeted something that kind of blew me away yesterday, and that's the fact that there's been no testing by South Dakota State.
Wow.
They're on the schedule. And if we all play, what are we going to bring to Lincoln when you visit? And it comes down to financial and state mandates with South Dakota State. Let's get into sporting news and ranking the top 25 programs of the last 10 years. Your usual suspects are on here, right? Nebraska does not make the cut. A couple of questions I have, and here's how Bill went about tallying the rankings. You get 10 points for national championships, 5 points for a national title game appearance. And when it comes to playoff appearances, did you make a Final Four? That's worth 5 points. Did you get to a New Year's Day 6 BCS? That's 3 points. Did you have a Heisman winner? That's 2 points. Your top 3, say it with me: Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma in at 4. LSU, a phenomenal year, jumps him to 5. Florida State is in at 6, and they were really good for the majority of the Jimbo years. Oregon, despite some coaching change, they were phenomenal with Coach Kelly. Helfrich had a couple of nice seasons, and then Cristobal was dynamite. Wisconsin's the second best Big Ten team in at 8. Wisconsin's been pretty dominant. They are gold for 10 wins, 10, 11 wins a year, and a way to win the West.
Wisconsin coming in at 8 is surprising when you look at the team below them, but you got to think Wisconsin does win 10 games a year. It's a consistency thing. Georgia comes in at 9 right after them, and Georgia's had a phenomenal last 5 years, but Wisconsin's just been solid for 10.
I'll say this, and I look at Georgia, right, and Wisconsin's done what Georgia hasn't. I should say Wisconsin's not done what Georgia has. Georgia's gotten to a championship game. Georgia's gotten to a college football playoff. Georgia's put a bunch of dudes in the NFL that are carrying the football.
Yeah. And
offensive line and skill guys, but Wisconsin's gone to a Rose Bowl, all right, or they've gone to a New Year's Day 6. They are on that verge, aren't they, of getting to a playoff. They've been good enough for a playoff. They were a damn fine playoff team last year until they lost at Illinois. I would have not been shocked to see them get in. The game against the Rose Bowl, they had it, and then they fumbled it away against Oregon. They lost by a point to Oregon last year in the Rose Bowl. I think Wisconsin ended up with 4 or 5 losses. Lost to Ohio State twice, okay?
What stands out about Wisconsin, last year and the past 10 years altogether, is they're never a team that you want to have on the schedule.
No.
never a team you want to have in the schedule. I think that's what should put them in the top 10.
And they've gotten better at not only Barry's scheduled some good non-conference games, but they've won some of those games. Playing well and beating LSU at Lambeau was kind of a nice jump. They've played Alabama, okay, and they've won some of their bowl games against the SEC. They've turned that corner against SEC competition. When they face them, they're at least competitive, and they're not going to get beat by the token 14 to 17 points. They've won some of those games. So Wisconsin comes in over Georgia, a little more flash. I'll say this, Georgia's probably underachieved. I mean, the fact they've had one national championship since 1980 is ridiculous. And they always would stumble against Florida, or they'll get beat by Tennessee, and then they'll end up in a Gator Bowl versus a New Year's Day 6. They've been better at going to the Sugar Bowl type games or the Fiesta Bowls, okay, or the Orange Bowls, that New Year's Day 6 rotation the last several years since Kirby's been down there. Mm-hmm. But under Richt, I mean, they were always trying to be better, but they were your token 9-3 loaded NFL talent squad, and you scratch your head about 3 or 4 losses on the season. I mean, in like pound for pound, I remember the Nebraska game where Nebraska beat them
down in the Gator Bowl,
right? And Nebraska had some dudes. They had a really good squad that year, but it was still okay, kind of a consolation appearance compared to what your aspirations were. That year, Nebraska was poised to kind of break through. They didn't end up getting to a Big Ten championship game. Same with Georgia. So your second or third place team in the league ends up down in the Gator Bowl, and Nebraska beat a team with Nick Chubb on it, and found a way. But Georgia's good enough to be in a 10-2 type year every year, but they don't make it happen. Auburn just rounds out your top 10. There's been more feast than famine at Auburn. They only had the one really bad step back year with Chiswick. There's been a couple of 8-4s for Malzahn. But what's funny is the year that Central Florida beat Auburn, really good Auburn team, really awesome Central Florida team. So Auburn finishes that year, I think, 8-4. But Auburn still beat Georgia and Alabama in the same year. So that's the caliber of that Auburn program. They'll get a couple big wins a year, but they'll have a tough schedule. Stanford in at 11. There were some really great years with Harbaugh at Stanford. There were some really good years with David Shaw.
Up until pretty much Christian McCaffrey moved on.
Right. I mean, we're talking, 3 years ago with Mac? So Stanford's trying to rekindle it. Brian Kelly had 1 4-8 season as Notre Dame comes in at number 12 and Florida in at 13. Sparty had a great 2010 to 2016. Then they've kind of fallen off. Boise's in at 15, Okie State at 16, Michigan in at 17, and Michigan's 38-26 over the last 5 years. He's 47-18. And he's pushed that program up. They just can't beat Ohio State. I'm going to switch it to Nebraska here. Where do you think Nebraska comes in? Let's zoom out. They don't make the top 25. Where does Nebraska come in? Where would you rank Nebraska in the decade?
Well, on this list, I see Texas at 25. Mm-hmm. And within the past decade, Texas has been above Nebraska.
It's
pretty. I mean, it's not.
They've not had a bowl drought. Okay.
It's not incontestable, but it's pretty clear, I think, that Texas is above Nebraska. So Texas at 25.
Would you put Nebraska 30s?
I'd probably go with the 35 to 45 range.
That's fair. And if you look at 2010 to 2014, that 5-year span, Nebraska was 47-20. They were finishing routinely in the top 25, or they were just on the outside looking in with either a 10-4 or a 9-4 season. But once 2015 hit, you go 6. Nebraska's had one winning season in the last 5 years. 6-7, 9-4, 4-8, 4-8, 5-7. That absolutely sinks you. Miami sneaks in just in at 24, I think.
Yeah, and
and it comes down to their draft picks.
I was going to say is that they've had a lot of first-round draft picks. within the past 10 years.
That's criminal to have. I look at Georgia and I look at Miami and I look at USC, more so Georgia and Miami, with all the dudes going to the league, and you can't win with them. I don't get that. I don't get how you don't win with that talent.
And that's my small gripe with this list, is that there is, yeah, NFL draft talent is important, but there's guys that don't succeed in college that just have the measurables that are going to go onto the draft.
Or that's what's more important to them, is to go play pro ball. So teams that were candidates to be in the top 25, as I see it, that didn't make it.
The others receiving votes.
The others receiving votes here. TCU has had a pretty decent decade under Gary Patterson. Nebraska, I just laid out their case. But, 28 and 33 over the last 5 years is sub 500. UCLA with Jim Mora was pretty good for a stretch. Tennessee, they've been all over the map. They're trying to climb back. And then you have South Carolina.
I hate to say it, but Iowa.
I have Iowa and Minnesota.
Iowa's had.
I have Iowa and Minnesota.
Iowa's probably had the best decade in their existence.
They were pretty good in the mid '80s.
It's arguable, but you know what I'm saying.
And they were pretty good in the mid 2003 to 5-ish.
I think Iowa's been better than Texas in this past decade.
I agree with you.
25.
And when Jerry Kill got to Minnesota, they were good. They were good. Parker Gabriel's coming up. Hope your Friday's going well. Hail Varsity continues, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back with you on a Friday. Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Our conversation with Barry Switzer a little bit more than an hour from now. We say hi to Parker Gabriel, Lincoln Journal star at Husker Extra PG. Parker, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
We're doing okay. Level of wow factor for you when you read and found out that South Dakota State has not been testing for the coronavirus.
Yeah, it definitely, I think it just sort of puts things into perspective, right, about all of the complexities. I can't say that I was shocked. I was surprised, but I think that, we've talked for a long time about the financial disparities between even the top of the Power Five and the bottom, or the Group of Five schools, and then from, especially from the Big Ten to the Missouri Valley. And this is, I think, and Justin Sell, the athletic director of South Dakota State, didn't go deep into the details, although he did mention the financial impact, to Dennis Dodd in that CBS story. But that, to me, it's just another indicator of the financial realities of this thing, and of all the complications that are going to spring up in terms of trying to play football this fall.
Are tests still between? God, what is it? This is like months ago. I heard a test between $100 and $250. I'm sure it varies, but even if you get a bargain, air quote, bargain deal for 150 guys or 120 guys, that's just for one football team, let alone the rest of your athletic department and all the teams in your athletic department. That's expensive, but it's necessary.
It is. And I think a lot of people out there think that it is necessary. It's interesting. There's some different ways you can do it. It's hard with a group the size of a football team. There are some group tests you can do that are not as expensive, where you test 5 guys and, you sort of bulk the results. And I don't know enough about it. I'm obviously not in the medical field, but it reduces the cost of the tests themselves. And then if you come back clean in that group of 5, then those guys are good. And if you get one positive in that group, then you either, test those individuals only, or you quarantine the 5 or whatever. And so there's some different ways to go about the testing. Obviously, you need to have it be a reliable test. But then, the other part of it is, and I think where you want to be fair to South Dakota State or anybody out there, is that it is different in June than September, simply from the perspective of, are they going to be able to play or not? Obviously, if you're a player or a parent or you live in Brookings or whatever, you might be or you might not be worried about the fact that they're not testing at all. But in terms of playing, you could theoretically test, testing positive or negative right now. South Dakota State could be testing 3 times a week, and whether they have positive cases, in late June really has no bearing on whether it's going to be safe for them to play football in September or not. So, it could be that they're going to test in mid-August or whatever. But certainly it's something, I think it just brought to the forefront the sort of click of like, oh yeah, right, non-conference play. This is one of the many reasons why that's going to be, complicated to figure out.
Complicated is the word, because, 2 weeks ago, I felt great about football happening, the full schedule. The spikes have happened in a ton of different parts of the United States. Nebraska's still relatively pretty good. The news out that Nebraska not sharing their information on positive tests, but I don't think they're hiding anything. I think it's more about privacy for their student athletes. So I'm okay not having broadcast who's got what or what team tested positive or what percentage, even though, the talk has been, look at LSU's roster, look at Clemson, look at K-State. That was publicized, and it kind of causes a little bit of panic. But I think Nebraska's got a handle on things, Parker, with their connection with UNMC and the folks running the athletic side of things down at Memorial Stadium. I want to ask you about Ezra Miller. And can you kind of put into a projection mode here what you think Nebraska's getting in Miller? I know about his measurables. I know about his rating out of high school. And I know what the ceiling can be for him. But as far as the fit and the pickup for Nebraska and this new route they've kind of gone with transfer kids that have already gotten a little bit of Division I seasoning.
Yeah, so I think with Ezra Miller, it is at this point, like it is with a lot of young linemen, it is to a large degree about the projection and about the frame and all of that. But when you're 6'6" and 310 and you've got some athleticism, that's obviously a promising starting point. And I think, he was in Iowa's 2019 class, and anytime, like last year when Travis Vokalek, the tight end from Rutgers, when he transferred, there's some schools and some positions where if someone is recruiting him hard at that position, you can tell sometimes by the track record, that there's some promise there. Nebraska's like that with quarterbacks, right? A lot of times if Nebraska offers a quarterback, you'll see other teams offer, and that's because of the reputation that Mario Verduzco and Scott Frost have in that department. I mean, with Iowa, it was a tight end last year in Travis Vokalek that they were recruiting, and Nebraska was recruiting too. And offensive line, if you have an offensive lineman that Iowa wants or Wisconsin wants or Michigan wants, I mean, those are schools in the Big Ten that have a long track record of developing linemen, offensive linemen. And so, I think it's a guy who Iowa is obviously high on. He struggled, and he's somewhat open about it last month with, anxiety and depression while he was there. And so, first and foremost, it's important for anyone to feel comfortable and feel like they're a good fit. And there's obviously some limitations with the pandemic on how far you can go in that conversation at this point. But Ezra Miller clearly felt comfortable, with the fit at Nebraska. And so we'll just sort of see. But he's just another guy you throw into a young, they've got some seniors now on the offensive line this year, but into a young core for the future, and a guy that you could see playing, tackle or guard somewhere down the way.
Could he get a waiver? I mean, or what's your read on eligibility versus the sit out? And you can there's different cases for different kids, but there's pretty clear case here for Ezra. He detailed it on his own social media account, all the things he went through.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that, Nebraska hasn't always categorically decided to even pursue a waiver. I mean, I think I don't know for sure what their plan is with Nori Newelly, the other Division I transfer walk-on linemen they have coming in. I mean, I think you could cite just some facts that Ezra Miller left Iowa for the reasons that he did, and Lincoln is actually closer to his hometown than Iowa City. I mean, that's just a geographical fact. Whether that is enough or whether Nebraska feels like they want him, to apply for a waiver, it's possible, that they feel like a year. Now, granted, he's already used his redshirt year, so, you might just apply for one out of principle. But, that remains to be seen. You never know how the NCAA is going to react to those things or what the rationale behind it will be. But it will be interesting to see if Nebraska pursues one for Ezra Miller.
Parker Gabriel is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And Parker, you mentioned Travis Vokolek a few minutes ago. He was Nebraska's big name, Big Ten transfer, I guess, last year. Can you speak a little bit about the development he made during his year of sitting out? And is he going to have a piece in this offense next year?
Yeah, it's interesting. Scott Frost said, one of the times he's talked in the past few months, I think maybe it was on signing day or perhaps at the beginning of spring ball. He said, redshirt year guys get out of redshirt years what they put into them, and sometimes, guys don't put everything they've got into them because they know they're not playing. That wasn't the case, is what what Frost sort of indicated with Travis Vokolek. Said he worked really hard, picked up the offense. I mean, look, he's a guy who is 6'6" and 250 pounds, and was maybe the best receiving threat that Rutgers had in 2018. So, that's. I think there's high hopes for him. I know I'm very intrigued by what he brings to the offense. You have to see it, obviously. The tight end position hasn't been as involved the past 2 years as anybody, Nebraska's coaches, or I'm sure the tight ends themselves would want in an ideal world. So we'll see. There's people in the program that think an awful lot of Travis Vokolek, and then at the same time, you've got you've got a senior in that room in Jack Stoll, and a couple of juniors in Austin Allen and Kurt Rathall, who've both played quite a bit too. So a lot of competition in that room, but I do think that Travis Vokolek will factor squarely in the competition for playing time there.
Parker Gabriel's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, Lincoln Journal-Star. Parker, about a minute and a half here. What's your reaction to Nebraska's 2021 recruiting efforts now that we have a third extension on the dead period? Nebraska getting a talented running back earlier, and you had a nice write-up on Malik Williams. What do you think Nebraska, have they surprised you with how well they've done despite no visits?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, obviously there's some guys that have had connections. Sean Hardy, the wide receiver from Georgia, had made it to campus. Some of the guys who committed had, but I think they're up to 4 now, 4 out of 10 that hadn't been to campus in, I don't know if I can name them off the top of my head, Branson Yeager, Patrick Payton, and a couple of other guys, well, including Gabe Irvin, who just committed the other day. So, I think they are doing well. It's interesting. Scott Frost said on that Zoom call with reporters last week, that he thought that not having visits was hurting Nebraska in recruiting. But obviously, they're up to 10 commits so far. There's possibility for more action over the next week or 10 days. And so they're still getting verbal commitments from players they like. And it will be interesting to see, first of all, one, if anybody's going to be able to take visits this fall, and two, if Nebraska can do more damage if those visits are allowed to happen.
Parker Gabriel, give him a follow on Twitter at HuskerExtraPG with the Journal-Star. Parker, thanks for a few minutes, man. Have a great weekend and stay safe, okay?
Yeah, thanks. Same to you guys.
All right, Parker Gabriel, a few minutes with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Good to get caught up with him. Kind of going around the football merry-go-round. Bill Dolman will be with us in 25 minutes. The Pride of Fairbury, a lot to get to with him. We'll dive into some Major League Baseball thoughts and the NBA. What's their next move? Hail Varsity continues, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut preteen Swedish boy.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Reminder about your friends at West Blue Realty. If you're moving in 2020, let the real estate professionals at West Blue Realty help you move today. They specialize in residential home sales in Lincoln and surrounding communities. They'll make this move a smooth one for you. For a limited time, you mention Hail Varsity, and West Blue Realty can help you with up to $1,000 on the closing of your next home purchase. Tom Luby, the man with the plan, he can help you out. Give Tom a shout, 402-540-3768. Or Kelly Hofschneider. Kelly's there to take the phone call at 402-202-2312. It pays to work with West Blue. WestBlueRealty.com, 1120 K Street, Suite 200 in Lincoln. Love this topic, buy or sell, right? Hail Varsity's going down the list. Good stuff with Brandon Vogel and Dr. Petey. And you can go through everybody in the Big Ten and circle who's going to have a better 2020 versus 2019. And, you know, the first team on the list is one of those kind of coin flip squads where Indiana football did things they've not done in a long, long time, damn near 30 years. And they went 8-4 last year, went to a bowl game. Will they be better in 2020? Are you buying or selling that? Nebraska has not made the discussion point yet, but there's been a discussion on Maryland and Indiana, Michigan, Sparty, and then Ohio State. Let's turn our attention to what Penn State has in store for them in 2020. So is Penn State going to be a squad that finishes in the top 10, wins 11 ball games, and loses to Ohio State for a third consecutive season? That sounds to me like, yeah, that's going to be Penn State. Penn State stubbed their toe against Ohio State. Penn State stubbed their toe at Minnesota, where, credit to Minnesota winning that football game, Penn State had 0 points 4 times inside Minnesota territory. I think they had 3 interceptions in the red zone. Didn't work out. Now you have Minnesota's offensive coordinator going to Penn State. Micah Parsons, incredible. James Franklin's been phenomenal. All they've done is challenge and lead Ohio State, but not close against Ohio State. And they've had to reload because they've had guys on the offensive side. When you think of Barkley or Godwin, when you think of some of the defensive line talent they've had, Penn State's defense will carry them. Penn State will be a top 4 or top 5 ranked team. Penn State still could lose to Ohio State and get to a college football playoff. I think the Big Ten has a great shot of getting Ohio State and either Wisconsin or Penn State in. I need to look at the schedule here real quick to see if if Penn State and Wisconsin play one another. I think you can get out of the Big Ten and not be a conference champ with one regular season loss and get in.
Especially if that loss is to Ohio State.
And they've been close.
They have been close. My thought on the Penn State team this year is it's kind of relying on what Sean Clifford's going to be doing.
And I think he's been okay.
He's been okay.
He's not been like McSorley, but he's been. McSorley had the flair for the dramatic, didn't he?
He did.
I mean, he had the flair for the dramatic. He was great. He hit a bunch of big 50-50 plays, and they weren't just, well, let's kiss our cross and hope it goes well. In that Big Ten championship season, he was really, really good for them.
Yeah.
And Clifford, I think, can be there too.
Yeah, all he has to do is be good enough. With that defense that they have, I mean, Micah Parsons probably going to be the best player in the Big Ten.
Remember when that dude was running fly patterns on Friday Night Lights?
That's when you knew the kid was going to be good. I remember seeing that and thinking, wherever this guy goes, he's going to be a superstar.
It's nice that he's visiting Nebraska. He ain't moving here.
But I mean, he was beating 3- and 4-star defensive backs on fly routes as a linebacker. I think at the time he was even playing a little bit of defensive end. So he's going to be the best player in the Big Ten next year, at least on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion. The question for me is this team is still pretty young. When you look across the roster, I think they have 5 seniors that are starting across their 22 starters on offense and defense. So the question is going to be, is this a year where they're looking to set up a college football playoff run the next year? Are they looking to make the run this year? I think it kind of depends on the early season success, how much they're clicking. Because this could be a team where if they go 10-2, 11-1 this year, they could be setting themselves up for a Big Ten championship, 12-0, running a national championship the year after that.
Here's what I look at with Penn State. It's manageable for them this year. Their schedule, they do have to go to Virginia Tech, allegedly. We can all say allegedly with the non-conference this year. That's big. They host Northwestern. They go to Michigan. That's not easy. They host Penn State. That's consecutive. They get Michigan. They get Iowa. They get Ohio State all consecutively. God love you, Big Ten. You don't take it easy on your big dogs ever. You always have some sort of death march involved with your team's best, with the best in the league, or some of your blue blood names.
Is that Penn State game against Iowa the week before Ohio State? Is that in Iowa City?
That's good for them. They are hosting Iowa.
That's good for them.
And they're hosting Ohio State in consecutive weeks, but there's no bye between them. Right? So they do have a bye between Michigan and Iowa. So that looks good. I think the trip to Lincoln in November won't be easy for them. I think Maryland, that's always a rivalry. That Chesapeake region is where Penn State loves to recruit, and James Franklin's got a lot of history with Maryland. They end with Rutgers, another kind of back-to-back rivalry-type games, at least regional rivalry-type games. Sparty goes to Penn State after Nebraska gets them. So if you were to pick out where Penn State loses, they could lose at Virginia Tech, but I think with that defense, they've been pretty good on the road. They could lose at Michigan, right? And they can lose at home to Ohio State. I think they can get by Iowa, and then we'll just see where we're at in the world of college football in November. Is Nebraska a better football team? Is Penn State a fading football team after that stretch? Because, and the other side of this too, Penn State's got to go to Indiana after Ohio State. And listen, going to Indiana now with Allen there, and even with Wilson, you better bring your offense, because you've got to outscore them most times when you go to Bloomington. That's kind of been the feel and trend. It's been that way for Ohio State. It's been that way for Nebraska. When you look at last year's shootout, even though it was in Memorial Stadium, you have to outscore Indiana, period, when you play them at their place.
But the big game, and it's still the top target in the Big Ten is still Ohio State. And I think Penn State's probably the only team in the Big Ten this year that's got a defense that's good enough that you could reasonably expect they could contain Justin Fields.
I think they can go smack the hell out of him.
Exactly. I think they're the only team in the Big Ten that's got a defense that's good enough to do that. So I think they're probably the only real challengers to Ohio State this year. I still think Ohio State's still head and shoulders above everyone else, though.
I am buying Penn State. I am buying Penn State to at least go 11-2, and I'm buying Penn State to finish in the top 10. I think they will do, at a minimum, that this year, if we get it.
I'll buy them just because I think they're going to finish second in the Big Ten. I'm not sure where they're going to finish season. Kind of depends where their losses are, but I could see top 15 finish with a loss to only Ohio State.
Hey, and their crossover, I mean, it's not easy in against Iowa, not easy against Nebraska.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. Bill Dolman coming up, and Jay Moore. Jay, a part of match play this week for the Nebraska Amateurs. And then Barry Switzer, the time he went to the Derby with Keith Jackson. And a fun Charles Haley story. 466-377-6800, 825-5865. You're a big NBA guy, Elijah. And testing has been going on, and it looks like, Mickey Mouse and Minnie and Goofy and everybody's going to be in that bubble, and we're going to get some NBA. How are you geeked about the NBA coming back, or have you kind of shifted gears to, yes, we want live sports, but there's still some time between when the NBA is going to get back up? We'll get some baseball in here in about 3 weeks, and then we'll hopefully fast forward into football.
It's cautiously optimistic for the NBA because, the players, some of them still have some problems with the bubble they're going to be living in. I mean, the Disney employees that they're going to be interacting with aren't required to be living within a bubble. So that runs into some issues whenever all the players and all the reporters are in a bubble, but the people that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis aren't. But I'm still optimistic they're making things a little bit more laid back for this. I think the NBA kind of understands what a weird scenario that they're in. Players are no longer going to have a dress code on the sidelines whenever they're not playing. There's replacement players that are being signed for players that don't want to go play there, or if they're scared of getting COVID down there, they can opt out of playing, and the NBA teams can go sign other NBA players. So it's going to be a little bit weird. The Lakers already know that one of their key guys off the bench, Avery Bradley, isn't going to be playing, which make things extra tough on them. Whenever you got LeBron, so let's be honest. But they have an aging roster around LeBron. So whenever you start losing guys around him, you're running into some issues. But at the same time, I think I can still be excited for the weirdness, even if I know, you know what I'm saying?
Excited for the weirdness. I mean, here's what I know. 16 out of 302 have tested positive. Mm-hmm. That's a small number. Here's what also I know. Clemson football, their COVID numbers, they are reporting them. June 8th, 2 players test positive. Last week, 21 more players positive to bring that total to 23. This week, 14 more players positive, bringing the total to 37. So what you do have here is about a third of their roster that's been tested positive for COVID-19. So I don't know if they're not isolating, or it was asymptomatic. So you're in the same living room, or whatever.
And that's what scares me about the NBA is how quickly it can spread, especially if these guys are living in a bubble. They're all in one of 2 hotels down there. Mm-hmm. That the teams are pretty evenly split among these hotels, but how quickly it can spread whenever you have someone who's asymptomatic. That's why I'm cautiously optimistic.
We'll check in with Bill Dolman. We'll get Bill's thoughts as Boyd Epley retiring officially, and he'll retire again, but this time for good. And Bill, a lot of time with Nebraska football. Got to see Husker Power up close and personal, and what a game changer it was for Nebraska to be bigger, faster, stronger. And Boyd Epley, the architect of that. So we'll get into some football thoughts with Bill Dolman. Jay Moore coming up, and Barry Switzer. Hail Varsity continues. Hour 2. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Hour 2, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal, Barry Switzer coming up in 30 minutes. Jay Moore on the way. We welcome in. He is the pride of Fairbury. He's with NBC Sports. He has starred countless times with Blondes on Mattresses. For TV, we say hi to Bill Dolman. Billy D, how's your Friday?
Well, I'm not hanging out with any blondes on mattresses. I'm hanging out with you guys.
I'm saying you have starred on TV.
Speaking, okay.
You have starred on TV with blondes on mattresses.
And that's not happening today. So relatively speaking, I'm all right. I guess I'm not as good as I could be, though.
No, absolutely not. I mean, Bill Dolman, your film work is unparalleled, sir. Brother, I got a lot to get into, but I want to start off with your experience, your insight, some thoughts on Boyd Epley as he is retiring, and I know he's stepped away before from the program, but pretty major influence for Nebraska football. Devaney through Osborne, and then back again, and I know that there are his nutrition and strength and conditioning disciples that have taken the mantle all over the college football world and just athletics world in general to make kids bigger, stronger, and faster. And what do you remember about Boyd and his contributions to Nebraska?
You know, the thing that a couple things stand out to me, and Boyd did a great job, and much like Tom Osborne, of enabling his assistants to develop as young strength coaches into becoming major college strength coaches. And I think of the staff that he had. And, there are times when I think that there were probably some philosophical differences with the way, the certain coaches had in terms of the way they wanted to train athletes. But nevertheless, I think Boyd had under him an incredibly smart and dedicated group of strength coaches that knew the Nebraska way, that even though they may have some different, philosophies on how to train certain athletes, there was still that understanding of this is how we do things at Nebraska, much the way Tom had his football program, and really Tom's influence was over the entire athletic department. But, Boyd had great people, Mike Arthur, Randy Goebel, John Jost, Paul Koch, the Kevin Coleman, I remember, Brian Bailey. To this day, Brian Bailey and I don't mean this in a bad way, may have been one of the more unusual strength coaches in the world.
How so?
Brian didn't fit the mold. I mean, Brian was kind of Brian probably was maybe not the biggest guy in the world, maybe 5'8", and maybe 150 pounds. But when it came to understanding how to train the body and do so in some unusual ways, but also being a great psychologist, and Brian worked a lot with the basketball program down at the Devaney Center, but, he had a lot of trust with athletes that would come back from the NFL. And, Brian, I saw Brian work out. There were a couple times when I worked out with Brian, and it's like I didn't know the human body could function in this way, But there were just so many guys that were just so smart, and he enabled them to do what they did, to relate to the athletes, and to better themselves as strength coaches that, bettered the athlete. And then, I guess, unfortunately, they went on and went to other schools, and the Nebraska roots, reach, from border to border, coast to coast, because of the program that Boyd created, not just in, sets and reps, but in allowing coaches to develop themselves. And then they took that expertise on to other places. Boyd is also a master marketer. Well, let's face it, if there was somebody who had any kind of strength and conditioning equipment, they brought it to Boyd for his seal of approval, and I'm sure Boyd was well compensated for a thumbs up. To that end, we were never without bells, whistles, and everything in the Nebraska strength and conditioning program. That was always amazing. But another thing that I want to say about him now is I think Boyd coming back to be a part of the Nebraska program, he was gone for, 4 or 5 years, I think living out here in Colorado, actually. Going back and wanting to help reestablish Nebraska's athletic strength and conditioning program, the athletic department, renew relationships between the department and the people. And Dave Ellis also, was a pioneer and arguably the greatest in terms of sports nutrition and development. For those guys to leave the life that they've had out here in Colorado to go back to Nebraska and to be a part of what Bill Moose is doing, Scott Frost is now doing, all of that, I think, kind of put a seal of approval, again, I use that term, on the direction of the program, the people in the program, bringing back a little of the history and the tradition and utilizing that to build the future upon. So I think him going back, Dave Ellis going back, Brandon Meyer, young guy, not necessarily somebody who was back in the days of Devaney and Osborne, but Brandon created an incredible empire at Sooner Vision at Oklahoma. You've got people who have deep roots at Nebraska who are using those roots to build the future. And I think Boyd going back, kind of says things are okay, and I want to be a part of it again before I retire. So I respect him for that.
Bill Dolman's with us, Pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports, at Bill Dolman on Twitter. Bill, friend of the show is Bill Bender with the Sporting News, and he put out, and he has a pretty rock solid theory here. It's not even theory. It's just, here's how we make up.
It's an algorithm.
Right. The point total for you to be a ranked team. And he went through and he ranked the top 25 programs the last 10 years. Okay. And did you play for a title? Did you win a title? How many guys did you put in the NFL? How many New Year's Bowls did you go to? All those things. And Nebraska's first half of 2010, they're 27 games over 500. They're playing in conference title games. Guys are going to the NFL. The last 5 years, they've had one winning season. So Nebraska does not get into the top 25 club of the last 10 years. Where would you project Nebraska when you look at 2010 through 2019 as we head into 2020? Where would you rank Nebraska? How far outside the top 25? Would they be just receiving votes? Are they a top 35 program? Are they top 50? Where would you slate Nebraska?
Ahead of Colorado, I can tell you that right now.
No shocker there.
Well, they don't even know that they have a program. Look, I think
it's all those edibles, Bill.
We're on the cusp of a new era, new decade. I don't see why I shouldn't put Nebraska number one.
Okay.
I view the world through big red, scarlet and cream colored glasses. So why not? I mean, nobody else has done anything this decade, right?
Not yet.
Right. Exactly.
Hope we get to.
So, there's 68 teams that start the NCAA tournament. They all got a chance, right? Except for the ones in Dayton. No, I think Nebraska is at the cusp of doing something pretty special. And, has it taken longer? Absolutely, than we wanted it to. But I don't see why there isn't any reason why Nebraska can't, with the new facilities that are going into place, with a fan base that remains passionate, with a coach that is relevant to today's college football player. I don't think the days of Nebraska being a top 25 program consistently are that far away. And I would be bold enough to say I don't think the days of Nebraska being a top 15 consistent top 15 program are all that far away. Maybe not this year, but maybe. But let's face it, there's really nowhere for the program to go but up.
Sure.
At least, so we hope. But why not? Why not buy Nebraska right now? I would.
Bill Dolman is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, it's difficult to put Nebraska at a numbered list. I get that. But are there any schools that you would compare Nebraska's last decade to in terms of success or lack thereov?
I would try to compare to Colorado, but I have no idea what they've done the last decade, and nobody else does either. Can I drive that point home anymore?
Just hammer that home.
I think it's hard to judge because it has been such an unusual, last 2 decades. Unfortunately, I think it'd be one thing if Nebraska had, peaked and did just completely slid downhill and been mired at the bottom, and that's just the way life is. But there have been so many, self-inflicted wounds with bad leadership and bad management that I think it's hard to really grasp, what the identity of Nebraska athletics is right now. The program that I often look back on in terms of its history is Minnesota.
Okay.
If you go back to the 1930s and 40s, in the days when Army was also one of the dominant programs, Minnesota was, like one of the, I think they won a national championship like in 39 or 40 or
they won like
41,
five in a row or something.
Yeah, way back when. And then they just, slid down the hill and stayed there. And there was just, kind of people, that's just Minnesota, that's just the way it's going to be. And then finally, in the last, maybe 8 years, they've kind of turned things around, but I wouldn't exactly say that they're on solid footing. But they certainly enjoyed a couple of nice seasons with P.J. Fleck. But for Nebraska, there's just been no opportunity to get any traction with decent leadership in the last, really the last 20 years. I was just having a conversation today with somebody with Pittsburgh roots, and the 4-year case of the flu came up, and you're thinking that was self-inflicted. You had, the chancellor that sure was a part of the NCAA football committee, but I don't think Nebraska necessarily did Nebraska a lot of favors other than follow along Tom Osborne into the Big Ten, which has given Nebraska some stability, certainly financially. The Eichhorst era was a complete disaster in terms of leadership. You just continue to set yourself backward without really having any identity in the program. So to equate Nebraska to another program like that, I think I think it's really difficult to do.
Bill, I got to ask you, you've been a part of broadcasts, you've been a part of athletic departments, you've had people ask your opinion on coaches or athletic directors because of your background in sports. And this is just an out loud question I've always wondered. How the hell do you get it so wrong? Not you, but somebody who's in charge. How do you get it so wrong with such a bad hire? How do you botch something so horribly?
Well, I do take blame because I should have been the athletic director at the University of Nebraska. And because I chose another career path, this is what's happened. So I do lay the blame at myself. Tom Osborne would still be the football coach,
okay.
Or as long as he wanted to be.
Uh-huh.
So, yes, it is somewhat on me. But I think you had people who just did not understand, aspects of leadership. And when they were exposed to what great leadership is, they didn't really pay attention. They had their own ego in mind. They had their own personal agenda and personal vendettas. And they executed that when they got in the big chair where people thought they belonged, but they certainly didn't. And you had people that went along with it. I think Nebraska was blessed to have had an athletic director in Bob Devaney who was a football coach and who understood what Tom was going to go through, the highs and the lows. And we all know the lows weren't very low for Tom, but I don't think Tom ever feared that he was going to be in trouble for losing a game, 3 games, or maybe even 5 games, 6 games, because Bob understood what Tom was going through and what it took to be a football coach and that program and everything. And then, certainly Tom Osborne and Bill Byrne had clashes of personality. Bill was the right athletic director at the right time to bring Nebraska from the 70s ahead of the rest of the college football and athletic department world, in terms of the way he operated. But he let Tom do his thing. Whether they liked each other or not, that's beside the point. They functioned together.
They worked together.
They worked, and it worked out well. But, when you had Bill leave and the decision was, and it was universally accepted, I think, that Steve was the guy, and it turned out to be completely wrong. And then you had, Harvey Perlman, who had whatever agenda he had. And then, you get rid of Steve, and fortunately Tom comes in there to kind of settle things, and the decision with Sean Eichhorst is still mystifying to me. I can't believe Barry Alvarez is to blame.
I wouldn't think
you just had people making bad decisions with people who, they're looking at more like at resumes, and instead of people with real athletic, I believe, experience. They were looking at people with resumes, and is this going to look good in the boardroom as opposed to is this going to look good in the locker room and on the field? And I think it was disastrous.
Bill Dolman, Pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports. Billy D, what got about 30 seconds here. What do you got happening this weekend?
Well, right now, after the introduction, I'm kind of hoping that there's a mattress commercial coming my way, but I'm guessing that's not going to happen either.
Some more,
maybe
some more art film work.
Maybe I'll try to figure out exactly what's happening with the NBA and Major League Baseball to see what kind of convoluted plans they have, because quite frankly, I just can't quite figure out what any of those people are trying to do. And I think maybe they just ought to say, look, everybody gets a ribbon. Let's call it good
and
hope there's football, right? Because I can't believe that anybody's going to win a baseball or NBA championship is going to hoist the trophies and go, wow, this was a great year.
Yeah. Bill, take care, and we'll chat with you after the 4th, bud. Thanks for the time.
All right. Have a great weekend. Go Big Red.
All right. Jay Moore's coming up with Hail Varsity.
All-State, 2-year starter, and rush in for the Big Red and NFL vet.
Is Dudeness or Duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
It's Blackshirt Jay Moore with Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. We say hi to Blackshirt Husker NFLer Jay Moore, his podcast, More to It, and you catch him on Big Red Wrap-Up as co-host. And Jay, put your putter down, man. I mean, it's been a busy week for you on the golf course. Congrats on what you've been able to do in your golf career, man. And another nice showing this week of the state amateurs. Kind of take us through how your week was.
Yeah, it was the state match play here in town at Hillcrest, and obviously being in Lincoln, I live here in Lincoln and very familiar with the golf course. You have to kind of go through 2 rounds of qualifying just to get into match play. So you have to, about 5 or 6 years ago, it was just one round of match or qualifying to get in. So you can kind of catch lightning in a bottle and qualify for 1 round. But now it's 2 rounds, so you got to kind of have to prove yourself for 2, and it kind of separates some guys. So I played solid. I played good enough. I played really well my first day. Shot 70, 200 par. Next day, I just kind of scraped it around, and to be honest, don't do anything too crazy to get yourself out of qualifying. So I made a couple bogeys and didn't make any birdies, but it was good enough to get in. So yeah, the match play part. Yeah, it was kind of a tough pill to swallow. Kind of got some bad breaks. It was kind of the equivalent of honestly probably having about a 3-touchdown lead at halftime and then letting them come back and losing overtime. That's how I would equate it to football. Kind of had it going. Was playing solid early. Hit some good shots. The kid I was playing, young kid, he's in college player, really good player. He just wasn't hitting as good, and then I kind of made a mistake, and he finally won a hole, and that kind of gave him some confidence, and it's just the momentum switched in the match, and that's just like in any sport. You gotta learn how to close out your opponents, and I just wasn't able to do that. And I had a chance to win it on 17, and he made about a 25-foot putt for par to win the hole, and then go to that, and then it was kind of, I just was on the downside. It just felt slipping, and it wasn't a good feeling. So overall, I'm always happy to make it into match play. It's a grind to do that, play well for 2 days in a row to get in there, but I got to learn how to be a better match play player. We just don't do it a lot. I don't do it a lot. I've qualified, for the match play part of it the last 3 years, and I've only won 1 match. I've only made it to the round of 16. So I've been knocked out, in the first match 2 last 3 years. So that's got to improve. But overall, like I said, when it comes down to it, first and foremost, my goal is always to make the match play field every year, and I did that. And just got to start capitalizing a little more in the match play. But match play is a different animal. It's a different beast. You're just playing an opponent, and you got to. Like I said, I got to learn to close out guys, and when I get the chance to. But Alex he's a really good player. And he just got the momentum going, and I couldn't get it back. So overall, on some other things, and I'll take what I did well this week, and move on to hopefully help me out in other golf tournaments the rest of the year.
Jay Moore's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Jay, thanks for kind of letting us in. That's a helpless feeling, and we've all felt it in some aspect of life. You've done it on the golf course or the football field, where you're doing your best and you feel it slipping away, but you can also tip your cap. If a guy hits a 25-foot bomb on you, I mean, that's just dude making a play as well, correct? I mean, you gotta kind of give props where they're due.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, he hit better golf shots than me coming down on the back 9. Like I said, I had a chance to really put him out of the match, early in the back 9, and I just didn't do that. I just didn't hit good enough putts, and it is what it is. Like you got to, in the field of 32, when you get down to 32 players, I mean, everybody that qualifies is really good. Mm-hmm. They're really good players. It wasn't guy that got hot for.
There's no Happy Gilmore out there, is what you're telling me.
What's that?
So there's no Happy Gilmore out there.
Yeah. You have to play. You got to. Everyone's really good. So it's just like I said. Yeah, I pretty much gave up a 3-touchdown lead at halftime, and maybe they had an early turnover in the third quarter, and or they blocked a punt or something like that, and kind of just flipped the momentum totally. And it's just all about energy, and you got. some good things going, and my energy was good, and I make a mistake, and it drains my energy. He hits it to a couple feet on the next hole, and birdies it, and I par it. All of a sudden, here we go. So I'm fighting my ass off, but that's how sports goes. You got to learn to close out people when you have them, and I didn't do a good enough job. So no complaining here. Just got to play better.
Jay, I want to go to Nebraska football, and what you're talking about with golf can apply to, what type of mentality this Nebraska football team will no doubt want to have. And we can cite examples of Nebraska having some leads and not closing out, and a team finding a way, be it Colorado last year or Northwestern in 2018. Those come to mind where you're just sick about it. When it comes to Nebraska's defense, Jay, I'm interested to get your take. Really impressed with the job Nebraska's done recruiting for a linebacker. And I know that these are just high school kids and they're 2021 kids, but you look at the recruits brought in for 2020 at linebacker, you look at 2021 prospects, and a kid I've really enjoyed talking with is Schweitzer, kid out of Northern California that's just – he's tall, he's athletic, he's 6'3.5" and 220, and really a nice hybrid outside guy, a lot like you when you transition to the NFL. What's the most difficult part of being that hybrid outside backer? Because you're asked to do great against the run, you're asked to be athletic and fast so you can run things down, away from kind of run the ball down from the backside. You're supposed to be decent in coverage, but also flip that switch and go kill a quarterback. It's a really tough position to get and get good at. What's the most difficult task to be really good at with all those jobs at the outside spot?
Yeah, it's for me, it's hard. It's tough because as a defensive lineman, you didn't really worry about coverages. It was just learn how to play the run and rush passer, and didn't really like to communicate that much. When you're an outside guy, you got to be a Swiss Army knife. You touched on it already. You got to be able to rush the passer. You got to be able to play the run, set the edge. You got to be able to communicate with defensive tackle next to you, the other linebacker, the safeties, the corners, in coverage situations. You have to play with a really good eye. You have to learn to pass. You just gotta. It's a lot, and you kind of get spread a little thin in trying to do things. You can't. You have to participate in 7-on-7, and then run down there. Usually, they're doing one-on-one pass rush, O-line, D-line during 7-on-7 period. So then you get 10 reps at 7-on-7, and you got to run down and do get a few reps of one-on-one pass rush against a tight end or an offensive tackle or something like that. So it's hard to really just get good at everything, but you have to be. You have to be really good at everything, and they just put a lot of stress. So that's why, you have to be big, strong, athletic, smart, play with good eyes. You just like I said, you get spread thin, and you got to be able to read. If you're not the guy who's rushing, you are going to be dropping in the pass coverage. You got to be able to still play the run if it's a run play, and then recognize if it's not to get back, get your drop, whether you're to the cover 4 side or a cover 2 side or whatever it may be, with whatever defense is called. So it's just a lot. You get spread thin. It's hard to just focus on kind of one thing, like most positions kind of get to do. Inside linebackers, they play the run and they have their pass drops. Sometimes they blitz, but they don't do it a ton. So it might be one of the hardest positions to really, for lack of better terms, master.
Sure.
On the football field. So it takes a special one. And when you see, the good ones that have done it before, I mean, let's be honest. First and foremost, in that position, the best thing a guy can do is rush the passer.
Okay.
That is the most important thing. That changed football games. That changes, how O-lines protect. You look at great outside linebackers, NFL. You look at, Devon Millers. I mean, DeMarcus Ware when he's with the Cowboys, and You just go down the line, you know. I mean, Lawrence Taylor's, Derek Thomas's, the guys that just could flat out change football games because they could flat out run the passer. Like, and yeah, they might have to drop and do some things every now and then, but you know, that's maybe 10, 20% of the defensive plays that they play. So most important, they got to be able to just flat out get after the passer. So if they want to really focus on something, that's what I'd say. That's the most important. That's kind of plan A for those guys is you got to be able to rush the passer. We just, you know, we're still missing that link right now with those outside guys.
Jay, a quick thought here, about 90 seconds. Jay Moore is with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Are you concerned with COVID numbers and college football, NFL, college? Do you worry that we may push the season back? Do you worry that we may suspend it, or do you think it's going to just trudge forward?
Yeah, it's just funny. It's just, you know, back in April I was worried, and then just a couple weeks ago I was, oh my gosh, we're going to get rock and rolling here. I still think it's going to be fine. This thing is, you're going to have some cases and show symptoms, whatever it is, you know, so they're going to be out for. We're at this point now, and I think PGA Tour has done a phenomenal job. Jay Monahan this week came out, you know. They've had a little cases, but let's be honest. I mean, they had over 2,000 tests, and only 7 people have tested positive. I mean, that's like a 0.2%. Like, you're going to have some of it, but let's don't overreact. That's the biggest thing. That's what, use information and let's make smart decisions and don't overreact to anything. And yes, will some maybe schools get hurt by this, maybe potentially, or NFL for sure. I think the NFL will for sure play. Some colleges might have to do some different things because of budget concerns, and I still think, you know, here in Lincoln, football's going to get going, and can't wait for it to start.
Can't either, man. I can't wait for that pigskin. Jay, have a good weekend, brother. Thanks for a few minutes.
Yep, you got it. Thank you.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back in Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. He won a Super Bowl. He won multiple national championships. Former coach with the Sooners and Cowboys, Barry Switzer, back with us. Coach, thanks for a few minutes. How are you?
I'm great right now. I'm a little head cold. Been doing good, Chris. Always enjoy being with you folks up north of here.
Well, we love catching up with you. But before we get to draft, you blew Twitter up last weekend with your outfit, and it looked spectacular at the Kentucky Derby. Where'd you get that sport coat, Coach?
Well, Keith Jackson and I, of course, Larry Lacewell had coached here for years, defensive coordinator back when y'all had Monty Kiffin there, and Tom were assistants. We were all together here in the 70s, and been great friends for years. And here, Keith Jackson, one of my great players, lives in Little Rock. Well, Larry's there at Arkansas, too, so I decided I'd just whip in there and pick those two guys up and go on to Kentucky Derby and have a great weekend. And, of course, we all had to get nice-looking outfits that fit the occasion. And we got people call us. They thought we were at a pimp convention when they saw Keith the way we were dressed up for the Derby. But, you know, we had a great time. It's a lot of fun. And Keith Jackson says, this doesn't violate NCAA rules, does it, Coach? And I said, no, I don't think it does. I can take you now after 20 years.
That's pretty good. How'd you do at the window? I mean, did you pick a couple winners?
You know what? I don't know anything about the horses, but I had a guy with us. I went up with a guy named Harold Ham, who bought the racetrack. You know, they ought to change $1 million row when he's in there. It's $1 billion row. He's worth about $17-18 billion. And we had a great time. He's like me. He doesn't know how to play the horses. He's worked all his damn life. You know what I mean? And so. But we did have a guy with us that's played the horses all his life. He knew how to box them, combo them, trifecta, exact, all that crap I don't know anything about. Well, we just turned him loose, and he's playing $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a race, but only certain races. He wouldn't play every race. He's only got he knows what races he wants to be in, and we would let him, and we'd take a percentage of his bet. See, and we ended up winning money that way. You know, we won a couple thousand, but it was he won about 30,000. You know, but he knew how to do it. I tell you what, you really need to know what you're doing. You just don't go pick it on the name or color of a horse or you know, the jockey and all that those things. The jockey's probably more important than color and the name of a horse, but it was fun. I did it last year. I did it again this year. I did it a couple times when I was at the Cowboys. I've done it before. I've been about 5 times. But it's always one of those bucket list events, and I really enjoyed doing it.
Coach, a lot like the Derby, picking the right draft pick important. Coach, did you enjoy the draft experience? Can you take me through your experience with it? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, sure, I enjoyed it. I think the one thing about pro football that you really enjoy is the draft and preparing for the draft is evaluating talent. I always in college, I always enjoy looking at high school tape of football players, trying to find that Billy Sims, that that Leroy Selman. You always got your measuring stick of what you have in your mind, what you've coached, what you've played with. And you're putting everyone up against their talents and abilities and what they look like. And because you remember that. You got a mental picture of how they played, how they practiced, what they look like on tape. And you're always looking for these guys against competition. And so when you look at college tape, I'm doing the same thing. And in the 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks before the draft, you're always in there every day with the scouts, talking to them. You're in there the next day with the coaches, because the position coaches have always looked at the people they would coach in the draft. And the scouts are going over their area, their talent in their area. We're going over their grades. We're looking at tape, giving their opinion on how these guys ought to be on the board and how they rank their players. And then we all get in there as a group, and then we evaluate. Everybody evaluates. We hold up a name of the top guys on the list. You go down your list of 100. You've already kind of pre-ranked them. And then you say, where should this guy go on the board? And everybody in the room says, well, that guy should go number 1. Everybody in the room votes on it. Might have a few dissenters, but most of the time it's a majority, and I'm the tiebreaker. And if there is a tie, and we put that guy at 1, then we go the next guy, the next guy, the next guy. And that's how you set your board. In other words, regardless of what position they play, Chris, you're going to set them up there by their abilities and talent. And it's not by what the needs of your own team is. It's what the ability and talent of the player is, regardless of the other 32 teams in the league, what their needs are, who they are, and all. So you set your board, and you know what? It's amazing how everyone else, the other 32 teams' board is set, because when you watch the first round be picked and go off the board, our first round disappears too, just like probably everyone else's first round disappears. We might have 1 or 2 guys left in the first round on our board that didn't go, and we might that's our evaluation of them. Doesn't mean we're wrong. They're probably going to go early in the second round, but it means that we've done a good job of setting our board when the rest of the league agreed with us, and yet we haven't even talked to them what their board was like. No one tells what their board is. And that just tells you you've done a good job in your evaluation.
Kind of validates if everyone's on the same page. This is the guy you got to take. Barry Switzer with us, Hail Varsity Radio, at Barry_Switzer. Coach, what was your thoughts on going after a guy that you knew was a giant talent and it would also fill a need, but maybe had some off-the-field issues? There's a few guys that had some issues, and you're a guy that was able to be a father figure to a number of guys.
I've always been able to handle guys like that. And I've been close to my players. I spent time with them. I did things that maybe other coaches didn't do. I go to their house. I go spend time with them. I go sit in the living room. If they're married, I talk to their wife. I did things like that. Even pro ball. I had one player who was a great pass rusher who didn't show up for practice one day, named Charles Haley. Great player, won 5 Super Bowls. And I said, where's Haley today? And they said, well, he didn't show up for practice, Coach, and he's pouting about something. He's bipolar, and he probably hadn't taken his medicine. I said, well, has anybody called him? And I said, does anybody know where he lives? Well, hell, none of my coaches even knew where he lived. I said, I told my secretary to find out. So next thing I know, I'm in my car. I'm over at his house. I ring his doorbell. He comes to the door, opens the door, looks down at me, and he's stunned. And I said, well, you going to invite me in, Charles? He said, yeah, Coach, come on in. So I walk in. I said, well, can I sit down? He said, yeah, I can sit down. So I sat down. And he sat down on the edge of his chair and looked across at me on the couch. And he kind of just in silence said, what the hell is wrong with you, Charles? You take your medicine today? And he said, yeah, Coach. I said, well, I said, well, what's wrong with you? And he says, well, you're the first coach I've ever seen in my home. You're the first coach ever come see me. I said, that's not why I'm here. I want to know why the hell you weren't at practice. I don't need to know that. And he started laughing. He says, well, I did. I said, isn't that stupid? Isn't that really stupid? We pay you millions of dollars to be at practice, to play your butt off in the ball games, and you're not at practice because that's a silly-ass reason. I said, now, damn it. You be there this afternoon for practice. I said, I don't want this anymore. Promise me you're not going to do that. And he said, Coach, I won't miss another practice. He not only never missed another practice, he became a great leader for me on the pro football field. He and I spent time together. We'd go ride a Harley together. It was important to treat each one of them differently, and you knew the difference makers, and you ought to have a great relationship with difference makers.
That's the king there, 50, Barry Switzer, recounting his trip to the Kentucky Derby and the Pimp Convention outfit he and Keith Jackson wore, and the time he visited Charles Haley. More on his sit-down with Charles Haley. More from Barry Switzer. Reminder, 1 out of 3 fatal crashes involves an impaired driver. Drunk driving, buzzed or high, never acceptable. Find a safe way home with a designated driver. Brought to you by the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Some kinds of kids in pro football. You give them one thing, I gave pro players something, Chris. Always gave them too much more credit. When I got to the pros, I thought, well, I'm going to be really a more mature kid than I did in college. I'm not too sure that some of them
other way around
because they've been pampered. The other way around because of their elevated success and who they were. They've had their butt kissed all their life and given every damn thing. You know what I mean? It just it was distorted. So anyway. I got along great with players, and I enjoyed the player relationship. I enjoyed college football because of that more, and obviously people, they're stunned when I say, what was easier? They asked me what was easier. I said, hell, pro football is easier than college football. You only have 53 of them in pro football, and they're all, most of them married. They're all making $500,000 a year, the lowest 53rd guy on your squad. And they're going to do what you tell them to do because they're making more money. They'll make the rest of their life. And, you only see them from 7 o'clock in the morning to 6:30 in the afternoon. You don't deal with their personal problems, all their issues that they have, the eligibility, study hall, dorm, all that crap. I don't have them 4 or 5 years like you do in college, 365, 24/7. Pro football is different. You might not only have a week before you put them on the waiver wire, So it's a different game, totally different.
Personal touch, always had it, always will. Barry Switzer, at Barry_Switzer. Coach, what's a good wine? And tell me where to get a good wine this summer.
Well, I don't think you can get it in Nebraska. My wine, Switzer Family Vineyards. You can go to the website, and it's Oakville, Napa Valley. It's great, the Cabernet Sauvignon. I've been doing this. 07 was my first year. 2012 is going to be a great year for grapes in Napa Valley. So the next wine I come out with should be great. You can order it. I don't know what the laws are in Nebraska about the ordering wine from Napa Valley, but some states you can, some you can't, and they have some dumbass rules. But we started this a long time ago just for fun. My son-in-law and I, and it's grown quite a bit. And we have produced more cases every year, and we only sell it in Oklahoma, Arkansas, where I'm from, and in the Texas and Dallas area. We hope to expand it to Houston and San Antonio, but we just don't produce enough wine. We sell out of it, and it goes into the shelves, and so grocery stores in Texas and liquor stores, and it's in all the top restaurants in Dallas and Oklahoma City and around this area, but it's not up there. But it's a good cab, and hope someone in Nebraska tries it sometime.
We're going to get a hold of one. Coach Barry Switzer with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Always love catching up, sir.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Barry Switzer, the chat with him. Barry's got that wine of rockin', and I love that Kentucky Derby story. Best sport coat ever, man. It was some sort of pink I can't explain, but I can't wear it like him, I'll tell you that. What do you got rocking this Friday night, Elijah?
Not much. Trying to recover. That new workout plan's been kicking my tail a little bit.
Okay. So, like, how long does it take? What are you doing?
It's about 2 hours in the morning. So we've been doing cardio with some basketball after our workouts, and then we do a push day, a pull day, and a legs day, if that makes sense. So
well done.
Yeah.
We'll see you in the morning. Weekend edition back. Myself, Kranak, Elijah, and we'll be ready to go 7 tomorrow on Hail Varsity Weekend Edition, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Have a safe Friday. Take care.